All right. So Jim, I'm just gonna ask you questions,
Okay,
and if you can answer them for me, that's all I need from you.
okay.
Okay. So Jim, tell me just a brief history of or like a brief look into your history with the society.
Okay. Do you want me to lead up to that or not?
However you want to
Just
tell.
go with it.
Well, I think if you knew my first half of my life, you would know how my last half of life works, because I was born in 1920, and I'm the oldest of seven, and we lived in a log cabin, and no water, no electricity, and no plumbing. And we slept on straw ticks, and my dad had a little farm, and Christ came in '29. He was able to sell he had a section of land. He sold that, so he was debt free. So we went into the Depression debt free, which in those days was hard. Everybody didn't have anything, so nobody thought they were poor. Because we traded labor and we did all these different things, to help each other out to survive. And then my dad hired help, and we weren't, he wasn't rich enough to have a bunkhouse, that's where the hired people live. So whenever he hired somebody, they lived with us. So I grew up living as strangers and so forth. So that's kind of the. Oh, and then I went to high school, graduated from the agricultural school. My folks wanted me to be a farmer, and I didn't want to be, but I took the course, and I learned how to build and how to repair machinery and so forth. So that helped when I got to be St. Vincent. And I guess from there, it was the Depression, and I graduated in '39 from high school. There was no jobs, and my dad wouldn't let me work for some rancher that would have hired me for $1 a day, but he said he'll work all of you. And so I joined the 3 Cs in the National Forest, and I replanted the forest up at Halsey. And in the wintertime, I got a job with the blacksmith first, and then I got into the kitchen, and that was my life work, really. So from there, I tried to get in the Navy. I couldn't. I was colorblind. I enlisted in the service, and I come out of the service and went to school, and let's see now. After I got out of the service, I came to Omaha, Nebraska, and lived a couple of years. And we raised a family, 5 adopted children, and then we moved to Lincoln in '52, and always took in students or people that needed a place to live while they were working in Lincoln and so forth. But these are all not street people. And then when I joined the St. Vincent de Paul in the late '80s, the first thing we did was study the manual. And the city mission had been built, and so our pastor took us on a tour to the city mission. And there was a little girl sitting in the waiting room, and they told us that she came from Guatemala, and she was illegal, and she couldn't speak English, and they didn't know whether to turn her out on the street or to send her, turn her over to immigration. And she called the parish, our parish, and we had a Spanish-speaking secretary, so she called me and told me about this thing, and I said, well, I saw her last night, so I told her I'd go out and get her. Well, she lived with us for 2 years, and then as we kept studying the manual, the Plymouth Congregational Church had a minister that was in charge of the street people downtown, and she said in our meeting, and then she asked me to be on her board. Now, I might be getting ahead of you here, but anyway, now I'm in St. Vincent de Paul.
Okay.
So you jump in whenever you want.
I mean, you're just, I'm here to hear your story.
Okay. All right. The city offered, their name was Daywatch, and they had a place downtown, and they took care of the street people, but the city wanted them out of downtown. And so when I got on their board, I found out that they were having a terrible time finding a place to take care of the street people. And they'd been turned down 25 different times, needed me and so forth, you know. So I told them, I said, well, why don't you just let me find a place, because nobody knows who I am. And I tried to work with Mary O'Shea, you remember Mary O'Shea? And the city wouldn't approve of the lot we wanted, and so there was a packing plant right in this area, and it was for sale, and the realtor found out I was looking for a place, and he told me he wanted $105,000 for it. But he says, I think I'll take 85. So I offered him 75, thinking I wouldn't get it, you know. Sure enough, he accepted my offer. So I had to run to the bank and get the money, because I didn't have any money. But the bank loaned me the money, and then we had a little fundraiser with mail out mailings, and we got some money. And then we were fortunate enough to get a loan at 2%, and so then I deeded the property over to St. Vincent de Paul, and we were able to make the payments. The scripture says you have to count your costs, you know, before you. But I figured that we could handle it, because they held me responsible. A lot of people didn't approve of what I was doing, but I was the president, so I took the liberty, I guess, and the city gave them, the day was $25,000, so I let them have a part of it. Matt Talbot, they were a group of people who took care of alcoholics, because there was no place downtown for the street alcoholics to meet, you know, so they wanted a piece of it, and so I give Daywatch a part and Matt Talbot a part, then the rest of it was same as all. We had a store, and we had, but then we got another anonymous gift of $50,000, and we finished building it. It was just a flat slab where they had the freezers, you know, so we had to build the wall all the way around it, and the roof and so forth. So we done that, and then from there these people here were developing their own, and then in order for me to give them match their $25,000, I matched it in rent, so you know I didn't have to put out any money, and it kept growing and growing and growing, and we got a store, and then of course it was a store committee, and my 6 years was up, and so I kind of got out of it, except for still being active and picking up furniture and so forth. So that's kind of how it is up to that point.
Awesome. All right. I've got a list of questions here for you. Can you tell me a little bit about Patty Gardner?
Patty Gardner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was a gal from Guatemala that.
Oh, you already told me about her.
No, but he didn't.
Yeah, she lived with us for 2 years. She finally, one of the other Vincentians in our conference at St. Mary's, after she was a single lady, and she said, "Why don't you let Patty live with me for a while? You've had her all these years, you know." And so I said, "Okay." So Patricia went and lived with the other gal, and of course they started bar harping, hop barring, or whatever you call it. And she wasn't getting help, so I tried to send her up to Canada because the Canadians have a better system for people, immigrants and so forth, than the United States did. But she got as far as Minneapolis, and she met somebody there, and they sent her back to Lincoln. They told her not to go, so here she was. And then, of course, this lady took her. And eventually, she found a man that got married, and then had a little boy, Joseph, and he went through St. Mary's and Pius X, and now he's out on his own. He's a night watch or a guard for some company. But she has liver cancer, and she's trying to get a transplant. She's been going back and forth to Omaha to make sure it isn't in her lungs, and they said it wasn't in her lungs, but of course a lot of those people from that part of the world have hepatitis, and so I don't know if she's taking treatment for her liver, but it's hard to get a liver transplant.
Yeah.
It's just too much of it. Next question.
Okay. Is it true that you served with General Patton in the Army?
Yes, Third American Army. I was in the infantry. I was drafted. I went join the cadre. You know what a cadre is?
I don't.
Okay, well, the cadre is a battalion or part of an army, and it was in Kentucky, 80th Infantry Division, and of course from Broken Bow, close to where we lived, they sent us to Denver, and they found out on my record from the 3 C's that I was cook, so I cooked on all the troop trains clear across the United States. I went. We did our boot camp in Kentucky and Tennessee. I don't know what those mountains are, Blue Ridge Mountains, and then from there we went to Salina, Kansas. Did our rifle training. Went from there to Yuma, Arizona, and did our desert maneuvers. Rommel was still in Africa at that time. But before we got back to New Jersey, Rommel had been defeated, and so we went into the continent to D+30. And we joined Patton's Army. Well, really, we were in Patton's Army, I guess, before we went overseas, because I was in the 318th Infantry, and we went in D+30, and our first battle was at Reims, France, and I don't know if you know George Patton, but he'd had that war over in a few minutes, because he liked to move, and of course they used him as a decoy. I didn't know that till some of the films that came out. So the 7th Army and the 1st Army, I think, went into the continent before we did. But then we went in, of course, we went to Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, and I think as far north in Germany we got was Frankfurt. And then we went down towards Austria, and that's where we met the Russians. See, Stalin and Rommel and the British man, what was it? Montgomery, yeah. They had a little get-together there in Egypt or someplace and decided that the Americans and the British couldn't get into Russia. They wanted Russia to come, and that's what's caused a lot of our problems now. We met the Russians down in Innsbruck, Austria, and then from there I did 6 months occupation duty at Munich, and then they said I got to come home in October of 45 or something. I was there 3 years.
Oh, wow. So you were a cook in...
Yeah, I cook, and what that means is you carry ammunition, you do morgue duty, you do everything but cook. Well, you issue rations, you know. We had, but the only time we could cook was when there'd be a truce or a patent get so far ahead of him that he'd have to wait. And we were in the Black Forest, and my captain, he says, why don't you get a meal for these guys? So I got my Jeep driver, and I said, okay. So we went out and shot a cow, brought it in and butchered it. And I got 3 meals out of that cow. And we could see the Germans across the valley there, you know.
They were probably jealous. They were probably hungry.
Yeah, and so that was about the only time I cooked. But like I mentioned at our last Congress meeting, I was carrying ammunition, and the shells were exploding all around me, you know. And I said, why me, God? Because there's a lot of young boys there that had families, you know. But anyway, I was unharmed. I got, in the Battle of Bastogne, we got the presidential citation, and I had 4 battle stars. Or not stars, they were called battle stripe. You know, whatever. And a bronze star with a cluster. And then when I come, you want to stop there?
No, go ahead.
Oh, keep going.
Then when I got out of there, I went, got home, and there was no jobs in bakeries around. Broken Bow had a GI training, but he never would respond, so I went to Washington, D.C. and took a short course in cooking and hotel management and so forth. And then I saw that was a dead end, so I was looking for a baking school, and the Army was supposed to be able to give you soldiers counseling when they get out, you know, to help them get situated. And finally, I found this school in Oklahoma, Oklahoma, that was a baking school, and so and that's where I met my wife. And so I went, got a job in Omaha, and
as a baker?
Yeah, in the bakery.
Okay.
And we wrote letters back and forth, and she wanted to get married in the next June. And then she wrote me and said no, she wanted to get married in November.
She didn't want to wait.
Didn't want to wait. So we got married on Thanksgiving Day in Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
Oh.
And then, of course, after that, we wanted a family, and the first few years we didn't have anything, so we started adopting. And we adopted interracial children because my wife was, her father was from Japan, her mother was from Spain. So in those days, they tried to match the children with the parents, you know. And so that's how we got into. So I have a Native American, I have the next one was a Spanish, and the oldest one, yeah, she was Native American and Spanish, I guess. And then the next one was Spanish, and then the social worker that was taking our case, she says, well, we need to get something that looks like you, you know. And so they gave us a little girl, and she was white, but she still had Native American blood in her because we found that out later.
So how many daughters and how many sons do you have?
I have four sons and 2 daughters.
Oh, wow. And
And
they're
they're
all
all-
adopted?
All adopted, yeah.
Awesome.
And then the last 2, one was mulatto and one was black. His mother came from Latvia. You don't remember the DPs? You don't remember the DP? They were
Displaced persons.
Yeah,
Okay.
displaced persons. Well, anyway, she was a Omaha, and she met up with this black guy, and of course they put the little guy in the orphanage. They used to have orphanages, and so that's. Then my wife said, "Well, that's enough. We got."
We've got a
Anyway,
good brood.
So, and let's see, my oldest son, he adopted. He adopted 1 or 2, and then my next son, he adopted 2, and his daughter is on the university soccer team.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she's
Wow.
been very, very active in that, and then my youngest son now, he's took off on his own. They were working all together, you know, as a family. And he wanted to shop on his own, so he's got one down there.
So he's the one who owns the bakery on the south side?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So you helped form the conference that you were part of, correct?
Well, yeah, there was a guy from St. Louis or Missouri or someplace came to Lincoln, Nebraska, and he was in the food distribution business, and he couldn't believe that there wasn't a serious Paul Society in Lincoln, in the diocese. So he went to Bishop Flavin, and of course Bishop Flavin came from St. Louis, and so he was very affirmative and willing to get us started. So we had the people from Omaha, the president of the council in Omaha came to Lincoln and taught us how to function as a St. Society conference and so forth. And then we had a meeting, and we got St. John's, Blessed Sacrament, and St. Mary's. In order to form a council, we had to have 3, and we were when we were aggravated, and then we got to have our council, and I was the first council president. And
So your council was made up of St. Mary's,
yeah, just St. Mary's. Yeah. Well, we had St. Mary's, St. John's, and St.
Blessed Sacrament.
Blessed
Were your
Sacrament.
council, and you were
Yeah,
the St.
and then
Mary's
we-
conference.
And then Cathedral and St. Pat's and Blessed Sacrament, they all come on later. And so that's how that started.
Now, had you been introduced to the society prior to your work to start it here?
I had no idea about St. Mr. Paul. I'd done all the things that St. Vincent does, you
Just
know.
not under the St. Vincent
when I
name.
was growing up, and Father Gideon was one of our pastors before Father Witt came, I think, or maybe it was later. I guess it was later because he said, "Well, now you got some help." Anyway, we just sort of were under training the first year. That's what our council was, or conference, and we went through the manual and we did a few calls. I think we spent the first year we only spent $800, but of course 4 or 5 years later it was in the thousands. But I thought we needed a truck, because we were hauling stuff in pickups and on top of cars and so forth, and tying mattresses to the roof of your car. And so the council of Lincoln Council of Churches, I don't remember the man's name, but he was, I think he belonged to Plymouth Congregational too, and he said he'd get a grant for us. So he got us a grant, got us a truck. So we got our truck, and then I'd go to the council meetings, and some of my co-workers said, "We don't need a truck." We did need a truck, and so it went on that way for a while.
So what year did your conference start?
Oh, in the 80s, I don't know whether we were congregated. I was going to ask Father for our abrogation, but I didn't.
I think it's 87, Jim.
Yeah.
I think I saw the document that incorporated everything.
You know what, and I can probably find
Yeah,
it on our database.
Yeah.
And you've been, and then you served as president?
Yeah, I served as president and secretary, and I never served as treasurer. I probably served as president maybe a couple of times. He had to lay off 6 years, I think, or whatever the rule is.
So you went back as many times as you could?
I didn't want to, no, I just wanted to do the work. I'm not it's not one of my pluses.
You're not in it for the recognition.
No, but
So, tell me about the Vietnamese people that you sponsored for jobs.
That was in the early 80s. I sponsored 35, my wife and I did. And I found out early on that, because of climatic conditions and from the two countries, that the lips had blister and so on and so forth. So, because I'd get them a place to live and they wouldn't like it, So I thought, the heck with that noise, I'll just bring them home and they can stay for a week or so and they can find what they like, And so that worked out real well because I'd get them a job right away and get them a place to live and so forth. And the last two I sponsored. Father Walsh, he was the head of Catholic Church, so he was the head of the immigration, part of the government. And these two boys, he told me that he just had 2 people left, and he wanted to know if I'd take them. I said, "Oh yeah, I'll take them." So they were just in high school age, so I brought them to the bakery, and I had an apartment above the bakery. They lived there. They worked in the bakery, went to Southeast, and then they left and went. One of them went to Omaha, and one of them went to Chicago, I think, and they got started in the restaurant business. That's what their thing is, and so this one boy, he met a nurse up there, and they got married and they asked my wife and I to come and fill in as our parents, for the wedding. And, he still writes to me every Christmas. And the kids are all grown up, they're going through college, and he's retired. I'm still plugging along. Anyway, that's one of the stories about that. Another story was I had this young couple, and she was pregnant. And I got them an apartment there on 16th Street and next to Ho, and then there was two girls from St. John's. They said, we'd like to do this. Can you let us take care of this family? And I said, well, sure, I'll share with you. No big deal. So anyway, they helped sponsor him. And when he left, most of them, Nebraska is not the place for Vietnamese. They stay here a while and they go south or they go west. You got to have warm weather. And anyway, she had her baby and they moved to California. And this one gal that still is in contact, she went out to see him, I think, last summer or summer before. They always ask how Jim is, And so he's got, his family's grown up, and of course he was Cambodian, and he started a church for the Cambodians there, somewhere in Northern California, but that was a nice family too.
So the kids who asked you to sub for their parents were Vietnamese?
Oh yeah, I did, we substituted for the parents for a Chinese family.
Oh, okay.
And these are, well, they were both Chinese.
Okay.
But the one that lives in Omaha, he still lives there. Okay. And they wanted me and Grace to sub for their parents, so we did. And
because their parents couldn't come over for the ceremony?
oh yeah, well they were displaced.
Oh, right, okay.
Anyway, this other family that I took and stayed a week when they first came here because they didn't like the apartment I picked for them. So I had to live with it. Well, when their daughter, I gave her a job. She worked in bakery. And when she got married to a midshipman, or I don't know what they call it, from South America, but they wanted us to come to the wedding too. But you see, the Chinese, the way they get married, you get a sack full of oranges, and then that's what they give Grace and I, a sack full of oranges. And we were outside the house, so we would come into the house, and then the parents go into a room with the couple that's getting married, and they get married, and that's all over.
So there's not a big audience, it's just the four of them?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, and I guess that's the end of the Vietnamese.
Now, and you also had some Syrians in your home as well.
Syrians? Yeah, there was an air pilot, and his wife, I think she's an air pilot too. I don't know whether they belong to the parish south of town or not, but he had money, and of course he knew me, and he came to me at the bakery and he said, I got this family that needs help. And I thought, well, why don't you help them, Anyway, you want to know if I can help them? I said, well, sure, I'll help them. And so the mother was here, and she had 3 children. And they tried to get into Christian school. They were all doctors and dentists. One is the dentist at Brent, and the other was a doctor. He he works in some of the rest homes here in town. But before they came, the mother was here with the 3 kids, and of course I'd give them food and so forth, and, help them survive until the family got together. Now, the one daughter, she's in med school, and the oldest boy, he's in Omaha. He's getting married this summer. So anyway, that was that family.
So you've been involved in helping all of these international people. Tell me a little bit about the work you do with some of the people, nationally, locally, through your prison ministry and stuff like that.
Well, one other story was that Father Tuchik used to be there in charge of Catholic Youth Service here in Lincoln. And, he had a young boy that didn't have a family. He was in Boys Town, and he wanted to know if I'd train him or give him a job. So I said, yeah, I'll take him. He's just a young kid, and he was Spanish. And I trained him as a baker, and then he went back to Boys Town, got a job, and eventually got to be head of the department. So what little I did for him wasn't much for me, but it meant a lot to him. And then, let's see, a lot of the referrals would come from Catholic Social Service. What was your question? I forgot.
Well, kind of like your prison ministry, you've had people
Oh,
work
yeah.
for you.
My wife used to belong to the Legion of Mary, and she'd go around and visit these people in hospitals, and she ran into this one guy that was in the hospital for something. She asked him if he'd like to be visited. He was, his grandmother raised him. He was from New York. He was in trouble from age 14 to, he was a young adult, and so we got permission. She couldn't go by herself. She had to take me with her. You have to go husband and wife. And so we visited him for probably a year or so, and finally encouraged him to get out. I had to go before the parole board. I had to go before the big shot and run the prison, He asked me, well, do you know anything about this guy? And I said, no. And I said, well, what if he did this? I said, I just turned my other cheek, I felt like I knew the guy enough to trust him. And so he lived with us for a year. He worked for Holiday Inn, got a job. And finally he wanted to leave the house. As long as he was living with us, everything was okay. But he got out and got an apartment with another guy that went to grind down and robbed a bank in Aurora. And so he was back in jail, and he felt so bad because he had let us down that he didn't contact us for a while, but eventually he did, because he got a job as a cleaning man, and I'd see him every once in a while. But he eventually died, and his wife, at the funeral, she thanked us for taking care of it.
And you've had numerous people who you've brought in to work for you at the bakery.
Well, yeah, you got to give them a job. If they get out of prison, there's no job and no place to go, they'll be right back. So whenever I've got 2 prisoners living in my apartments now. I got one prisoner who's working for me. He's worked for him for 9 years. I got him out 2 years ahead of time. And so, they're human just like we are.
And why do you feel like you're drawn to do this? What makes you so passionate about this?
Corporal works mercy.
It's pretty easy.
Is that an answer?
That's as good an answer as any.
How does that differ
Well,
from and what do you think about it? I mean, you and I have conversations in the car.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that people want to hear about.
Okay, well, I think there's too many people. The government has spoiled the people. They just give them too much, and they depend on the government. If they can't get it from the government, they'll come to St. Mr. Paul and try to get it from them or some other agency. And there's no incentive for them trying to make it on their own. You know, they just think that we owe them a livelihood, and that's the difference. And you know, in my early days, there was no government subsistence, and we didn't expect any because it wasn't there. But we all survived. The people that had a hard time would go to California, or you know, to look for a better life. But the ones that stayed at home, you know, we were able to raise enough to live on. We'd eat jackrabbits and squirrels and things that people wouldn't even think of today. You know, but if you told somebody they needed some meat to bring them a squirrel, oh man, they'd throw that squirrel at you. You know, they sure would. Yeah, it's too bad. The government, we got to get the government out of it. And I'm sure the Pope Francis thinks that way too. I mean, he thinks that there should be more sharing, you know, so that people do have food at least, because they're entitled to food. But most of them are of the world, not, you know, we're in the world but not of it. That's the way the Vincentians and Christians are supposed to be anyway.
What do you think the people that we do home visits for now, if we were to say, we have a job for you, compared to when you in fact either gave them a job or looked for a job, tried to place them? Isn't there a difference in the people that we serve now?
Oh yeah, when I was helping the Vietnamese, I'd take them to a place to get them a job, and they'd say, "Well, he doesn't know our system, or he doesn't know this, or doesn't know that." I said, "I'll work with him until I'll prove to you that he can do the job." And of course, then they'd hire me, because they didn't want me showing up. But, and then I had a young lady that was a seamstress, and I tried to get her a job, and I took her to one of the dry cleaners here in town, and they wouldn't hire her. They said that she probably didn't know the system or something. I said, "Well, what would it take if I just hired you to give her a chance to work?" And so they agreed to that. They didn't pay her, but they give her a chance to learn to be a seamstress, which she already was. You know, so. But you can't do that with people now. They wouldn't do it. But that's what I always tell people. You need help, I'll give you a job. If you want to work, okay. If you don't, you know, go somewhere else.
Okay, so
I'm tough. No, I have been tough with some people, but you know, they got to shape up or shape out. And especially if there's a man in the house, you know. And that's and the man's there just to take advantage of the woman. He's not there to support him or anything. You know, if a man, even if he's got a 30-hour-a-week job or 2 jobs, he ought to be able buying up groceries to take care of what he has got there, a wife or a woman and 2 kids, you know. But they don't see it that way anymore. They want to have their fun. They want to have their, it's me, and let somebody else.
You think that's one of the biggest problems
Yeah.
with society today? Is that everyone's
Yeah.
so
Well, and these men will tell the girls, go get help from CVSD Power, go get help from Lincoln Action, or go help get, you know, I know they do that.
How could we serve the poor better here in Lincoln? Or anywhere?
Well, I always felt like to know somebody you had to work with them or live with them. Otherwise, they can pull all kind of wool over your eyes. But I tell you, if there's a man around the house or if there's a woman that can work, I try my best to find her a job. That's what I've always done. I've been very successful too. Of course, I was doing it in a time where they would work. You know, nowadays they don't want to work.
You were a job search. You were your own job search company, right?
Yeah.
You were an employment agency.
Yeah, that's right. And I trained a lot of people. I even trained people on government programs. I used to have a program where they would try to teach people a trade or a skill, and it finally disappeared, but it's coming back. I think the government is going to try to train people to get back in the workforce.
So you're helping people find jobs all over, not just at your bakery.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just a small mom and pop bakery, and you know I can't give a job to everybody.
So what do you look for in these people that you're employing? Is there certain qualities?
Well, I try to find out what their skills are,
Okay.
and go from there, you know. And while you're doing that, you get to kind of learn a little bit about them, and you know who they are, and if they're really serious about working. You know, I've offered people to take a job. I'd give them half, and they'd earn half, so, but they wouldn't do it. So you know what's going on.
So that's when. So if they're not willing to do the work, then if they're not willing to put the work in, then you're not.
No, St. Paul says if you don't work, you don't eat. And we're kind of afraid to tell people that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't work, you don't eat.
The difference now, though, is that they can find somewhere to eat.
Oh, yeah, that's
Now,
right.
now we're not talking about eating. We're talking about
Yeah.
internet. We're talking about cable TV. We're talking about phone service. We're talking about cars. We're talking about a variety of things now.
Yeah. Well, I have a ring. That's about, and a shirt and the pants. That's about all I have. So what I give isn't anything material as it is trying to help them help themselves. But it just doesn't seem to work that way anymore. I've taken in people. I took a black man in. Father Tuchek wanted me to take him in. He was at City Mission, and Father Tuchek asked me if I'd take him because he was Catholic and this and that and so on. I said, yeah, I'll take him. Well, he'd use a computer. My wife used to do the bookkeeping part of the business, and she had a computer at home, and he'd get on that, and he'd get several offers for jobs. He wouldn't answer them. They'd call on the telephone and want to get a hold of him and for an interview, because He came from Africa, and he was a teacher. And he had a son in Texas, and but he wouldn't answer. And he'd get up in the morning, throw the towel over his shoulder, walk into the bathroom, and act like a king. But he wouldn't respond to the calls he was getting for jobs. So I told him finally, I said, "You got to get going. You're just."
And he was staying at your house.
He was staying at our house, yeah.
That's bizarre.
That's. You'd think he'd be a little more gung ho, but I guess sometimes people just aren't that motivated.
A lot of the referrals I got, for people that were homeless at Catholic Social Service, Father had asked me he had somebody who didn't have a place to live, and I didn't know if I'd keep him for 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks it turned into 6 weeks, and I had this one woman, she had two little boys and a little girl, and these little boys were always crawling all over me, because they missed their dad, I'm sure, because she was from Oregon. She came here because her mother died, and she was going to, Catholic Social Service was going to provide her with a home, but they couldn't find a place for her, and so Father asked me if I'd keep her, and she was the one that was supposed to only stay 2 weeks, and it was more like 4 or 5. And finally she got tired of waiting and went back to Oregon.
So her and her children stayed with you?
What's that?
Her and her children stayed with you? Or just her?
No, the whole family. The 2 little boys and the little girl.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went back to Oregon?
Yeah, they went
How'd they
back
get
to Oregon. The little boys went to Cathedral to the school there, and because I'd get bills for their schooling, and I wasn't paying the bills for them, but I did try to help her as much as I could. But she had the ability to. She must have been. I know she's Native American because her mother had a Bible. She left the Bible at the house, and I don't know what the name was. White Hall or White Horse or some Native American name.
And then she went to Oregon. How did she get to Oregon?
She drove. She had a car.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So she had, evidently she had some money. I don't know where she got it from. I didn't give her any money, and I just give her food and shelter and place to sleep and so on.
What excites you?
What?
What do you get excited about? Besides decorating a cake. Tell us a little bit about that.
Father Wet had St. Vincent de Paul for 20 years, and he would, people would come to the house. We were downtown Parish, in the inner city, and the bus depot used to be down here, and the church was up here, so they truck on down to the parish, and when I'd help, I'm an acolyte, and so I'd help with the mass at noon, and I'd come in the back door and I'd see a suitcase there, and I'd say, "Uh-oh, here's another one." So then Father would say, "Well, Jim, I got somebody that needs help." He says, "I told her to be here after Mass and you talk to her." I said, "Okay." So he'd taken me back, and then one case she was from, she was from Massachusetts, that's where she came from. He introduced me to her, and she said, "I won't talk to anybody but a priest." And he said, "You talk to this man or you're out of here." That's the way he's treated people, So I said, well, what's your problem? She said, "I need a place to live, and I'm not going to a motel." I said, "Did I say you were going to a motel?" No. I said, you're going home with me. Oh, and she lit up like a lamp, you know. So I took her, she stayed with us about a week, and then police picked her up. She was supposed to come home on Friday. This is the end of the week. And the police called my wife and asked, he said, got this lady down there, and he says that you're doing some bad things to her. And my wife said, well, she's a little bit loose. And they said, well, they suspected that. So they sent her to the place in takes care of the alcoholics, what's that?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so she stayed there, and they found out she was an alcoholic. She was kind of out of it. And so they sent her back to Massachusetts. That's why I say you gotta, if you do what they want to do, they'll just keep running, you know, from one place or another. But you gotta stop them somewhere and find out what their problem is so they get help. Then we had another gal, and she came from Denver, and Father wanted me to talk to her. And she came to Lincoln to be a sister. She wanted to join the Carmelites. And I kept asking her, I said, have you got an appointment with the Mother Superior? She wouldn't answer me. I said, I'm not taking you out there if you don't have an appointment. So we get ready to eat, and I'd go in the bedroom and tell her, come on out, we're going to eat now. She said, oh, don't bother me, I'm praying. She'd be kneeling in front of the window, you know, praying. So finally she kept insisting that she get out to see the Carmelites. So finally I took her out there. I said, no, I'm going to stay here 1 hour. And if you aren't ready, I'm going to go. It wasn't very nice of me, but anyway, I kind of getting fed up with her because she wouldn't do what I was asking her. And so I left and she left. And then the sisters called secretaries, Pat and my wife, and they went out and got her, brought her back. Well, she stayed there that night, and then somebody from Blessed Sergeant come and got her the next morning. And hopefully they send her back to me. But, you know, I try to help them.
Jim, if you, not that you keep count, but if you had to guess how many people have stayed at your house?
I was going to ask.
Oh, my goodness. I've been taking care of them for 50-some years. I had one guy that just recently, he was living out of his car, and so I don't know whether father sent him out to the house or what, but he was a computer expert. And I was trying to get him a job, but he didn't want anything I could find for him. He wanted to work with the internet or the credit card people or somebody. And so he wouldn't eat with us. He had his own diet. He had fried mushrooms, and he ate the craziest things.
Fried mushrooms was on his diet.
Yeah, that was on his diet.
Interesting.
And he kept his food in the trunk of his car. So, but finally he did get a job in South Dakota or North Dakota, someplace up there. So it turned out okay.
And he stayed with you? He was with you?
Yeah, he stayed with us for as long as he Then the sisters are always sending people to you because they're so kind. This guy's so nice.
Which nuns?
Okay.
It was a family that she was pregnant and it was Christmas time, and she wouldn't stay at the mission. Father, our parish pastor, put her up in a motel for 4 nights, and they came back and complained to him about how, and of course he made them apologize to the secretary because they were telling the secretary what a bad place it was. And so he got, I don't know, Father Kubat found out about it, and I don't know, he was connected with it. Anyway, he says, we got this gal that's pregnant, and it's Christmas time, and the baby's due, and they don't have a place to stay. So I said, oh, I'll take him. So I took him and took her to the hospital. And she had her baby the day before Christmas, or maybe 2 days before Christmas. And then I went out to get him to bring him home, and the police were there, and they weren't going to let her out. And of course, he insisted that I guess he was the husband, or he had a right to take her out. So anyway, they had a place, and so they brought him back, and they stayed about a week until I could find him a place to live. And
A new baby? You had a new baby at your house?
You had it.
Oh yeah, we had he's only 5 pounds, you know. They gave me the little guy, and I could hold him in 2 hands. You know.
I bet you didn't get much sleep that week.
Oh, well, I could sleep. I slept during the war. I slept on boxes or
I guess
foxholes
that's
or
true.
cow barns or whatever, and I never slept on flour sacks or anything like that, like some bakers did. Anyway.
Those might have been more comfortable than boxes.
Oh yeah, well, but my captain during the war, he'd come up and he'd wake me up. I drove the truck, supply truck, and he'd say, "Jim, we're moving on." And I said, "Okay, I'm ready." He said, "You know, you're the only guy that can wake up and be ready to go." Because I can sleep 4 hours and I'm all ready to go again. That's my cycle.
Well, you've been doing this for so long that you're used to it.
Well, this is the last one I've done, so.
And now, you go to the bakery every day,
Oh yeah,
but about 10 o'clock, right?
yeah. I have a lady that works for us, and I can't drive and I can't see very good, so she picks us up at around 8:30 and takes us to breakfast, bring us home, and helps my wife. Got Alzheimer's, you know, and so she fixes breakfast and does things. My daughter's the only one that'll help her. The boys, that's foreign to them. They don't want to. They don't do very much to help their mother. Of course, we know that how old people are treated by their siblings, and by their children. But my children are good to me, but they just don't come and help me take care of my wife.
Except for Rhett? Is Rhett?
Well, Loretta is in California now,
Oh, okay.
so it's Mary.
Mary is doing.
Yeah, and she works at Tabitha at night, and so, she can help us. And then she takes care of her on Saturdays when I go to Mass, and then I take her to Mass on Sundays.
Sunday. And you still go to your conference meetings every week?
Well, because they've asked me to come. See, at St. Mary's, we don't have a conference anymore. Our parish pastor, he's one of these guys that does everything himself. So
You live in Cathedral now.
Hmm?
You live in Cathedral now.
I live in Cathedral Parish now, so I go to their conference meetings in Blessed Sacrament.
So you go to 2 different parishes.
Well,
conference
they
meetings?
combine.
Combined.
They
Oh,
meet together.
I was like, wow,
Yeah.
really?
I'm still a foreigner.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Okay.